Hey, Kyler here. Our aim for this show is to leverage every opportunity that life throws at us. I hope you find value in today's show.
Tyler, what is one burger restaurant that I desperately wish was in Arkansas?
Oh, Cord, I wish it was the same. I wish it was in Arkansas as well, but I'm gonna go with In-N-Out Burger.
In and Out Burger. Some of the best fries. Got to go animal style on the burgers. I'm telling you, it is just so good. I mean, if you've ever been In and Out Burger, I mean, probably a couple things you noticed. One, their fries are awesome, and you're gonna get a good meal every time you go. And then two, you probably know the cups. You're seeing the red palm trees. You're seeing the yellow lettering, the California vibes as you're walking in, diner feel. And then when you flip the cup over, think of what you see in your mind. You're probably going to remember on the soda cup or the milkshake cup or even on the wrappers, you're going to see a Bible verse. It's printed small on those water cups and those soda cups. It's printed John 3:16 on the bottom of the cup. This was actually put in place back in the 80s by one of the founding family members, one of the sons. The Snyder family was trying to be devoted to their faith, and they made it very public that they would put some ink of some Bible verses on every single packaging that went out and went into people's hands. And I would imagine billions upon billions of cups have been given out to this day. And so many people have seen their values right there on a cup. That maybe you've heard of John 3:16 before, but for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. And whether or not you believe that, that's up to you, of course. But for our sake in today's episode, it's a family sticking to their values through perseverance, through resilience, through all that life had to throw at them. That today, even with backlash and trying to get canceled for doing this, they stay strong to their family values and their legacy. So we wanted to go into this not so simple success story, one with a lot of tragedy, but the Snyder family has consistently persevered and been resilient throughout it all. And we're going to dive into this family today on our fourth family in the Stewarding Legacies series that we're in on the Leverage Life show. So Kyler, let's jump into it. The Snyder family.
Yeah, let's jump into the history just like all the other families. But I feel like I have a confession to make with In-N-Out is I really have because we live in Arkansas and, obviously Texas isn't that far from us, but there's lots of In-N-Outs in Texas. But I had In-N-Out Burger like the first time like a year and a half to 2 years ago. And we've been going to Texas, like Dallas for a long time.
Yeah.
And I finally told my wife on just like a weekend getaway trip to Dallas or whatever to see the Rangers play. I was like, you know what? I've never had In-N-Out. I was like, I need to see what all the fuss is about. So, anyways, we got it, of course, and on the road, headed to our hotel and stuff, just got it to go, and I was blown away. Number one, and by the biggest thing I was blown away by was the box because you can just eat it in the car. Like all the other restaurants, it's in bags and you got to pull it out. You got to do all the things, but it's like it was just perfect in this little box that you could just sit in the passenger's lap, and it was just so easy. So I was like, they've got my attention. I'm going here every time we come to Texas. So big shout out to them for impressing me on something that's probably really not that impressive, but I enjoyed it. So it's the small things in life, right? Um, but anyways, let's dive into the history. So I'm gonna pull up my notes here. So In-N-Out started in California in 1948, like Cord mentioned, it started in California by Harry and Esther Snyder. They're the original founders. And Harry had the idea kind of ahead of his time to have a drive-through hamburger stand and have customers basically come, through an intercom and, order and do all the things like that. So that's kind of how it originally started, like I said, kind of ahead of its time compared to a lot of the places that we see now that are very mainstream within restaurants and fast food chains. But the big thing that I really want to just kind of focus on here, and like Cord said, this is a story kind of about family resilience in a lot of ways. There's some stuff that happened in this family, and I'm going to talk very briefly about some of this stuff. And like I said, I always encourage whoever's listening to this to to go online, read their story just more in depth than what we're just giving briefly here in this episode. But anyways, Harry and Esther, they had two sons. Guy was born in 1951. Rich was born in 1952. And Harry passed in 1976, and essentially the company was then passed to the younger son, Rich. It was not passed to Guy; he was the older son. But Guy had, really had struggled with some addiction throughout the years, and essentially, the company was just trusted to Rich. Rich ran in and out throughout the 80s and the early 90s. Just kind of expanded, with typical family business. They just keep on progressing and adding things as they go and go. But the biggest thing that I think that Rich, one of the biggest impacts that he had on the company was he did come to faith in the early 90s, and excuse me, and he wanted to make that public. And one of the ways that he did that, Cords, that earlier, was putting Bible verses on cups and different parts of their products where their food was in. And so, like I said, put John 3:16 on the bottom of every single cup. And unfortunately, on December 15th of 93, Rich actually passed away in a plane crash near Fresno. He was only 41 years old, and he had a niece. Her name was Lynsi, and this was Guy's daughter. And Lynsi was only 11 years old when Rich had passed away in the plane crash. But anyways, Guy took over the company, which is Lindsay's dad, and Rich's brother, of course. But like you said earlier, Guy, he really had some struggles with some addictions throughout the years, and actually ended up passing early as well in '99. He was only 48, and so Lindsay, his daughter, was only 17 when she lost her dad, and so Esther Snyder, which is Harry's wife, she went through a lot. She lost her husband. She lost both of her sons. And that is something that is, I can't imagine, obviously going through something like that. But the perseverance that she had and to really just continue throughout these hard times, I think, like I said, that's something that is very obviously worthwhile to note, and just outliving all of them. And anyways, lived into her 80s. Was the president, step back eventually, and passed away in 2006 at 86. So really, the matriarch of the family just experienced a lot of just hardship.
Mhm.
So really, the only person left within the family was this girl named Lindsay. And so Lindsay, like I said, is Guy's daughter, Rich's niece, and the only grandchild of Harry and Esther.
Mhm.
Third generation, and really just started to take on ownership. I know that she did work in lots of different aspects of the company. I read one thing actually of one of the restaurants that she started out with, just doing kind of the normal restaurant stuff with like prepping the food and things like that. Nobody in the restaurant actually knew who she was, except the manager. So they didn't want people to know that she was actually directly tied to the line of, or the heir to the throne, essentially. And I say all that to say, so she had worked through different aspects of the company, and then eventually just became president and received shares. And the full shares of the company was eventually came to her on her 35th birthday in 2017. So she's been the president ever since 2010, and has continued with that legacy that Rich really had started with his faith, and adding Bible verses, added several more to other products and stuff. And I think for just any company, like we've talked about, there's obviously things that when you get big enough, different controversies will come out, whether you call this a controversy or not. But there's a lot of people in today's culture that are going to give backlash to her and what they do for actually putting Bible verses on their products. And she's come out multiple times saying, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. Like, we're not changing this. And so having that kind of firm, just boldness to proclaim that in the world and saying, hey, this is how we are going to do things, that I think that's very respectful, obviously. And so just kind of like looking back at the story, there's a lot to learn, a lot to just look at and say, hey, this family went through a lot. And, Lindsay's got the reins now, and she's doing her thing and leading this. Obviously she's been crushing it. She's and had numerous accolades as one of the top CEOs in America, and being a female, of course, and very highly respected. And I think that there's a lot that you can learn from just them and their family. But one of the biggest things I feel like I take away from this specifically is just the persistency and the resilience to continue this on even through hardships.
Everybody's got stuff. I learned that pretty quickly. Whenever I was working a long time in ministry and pastoring people, it's just everyone's got their own stuff going on. Can you believe that?
I know.
It's just everyone's got their own stuff. And when you stack everyone's stuff next to each other, most of the time you would pick the one that's in front of you because it's your story. And it's the one that God has entrusted to you. And it's the one that you're having to persevere in, that your faith is being put in the trenches in. And that is exactly what Lynsi Snyder had to go through in her faith. And just like any of us, she's going to struggle in the midst of losing family members and being trusted great responsibility and handling it as well as probably any of us could. And here she is, third generation in leadership. And now she is outspoken, doubling down on the conviction to leave those Bible verses on there. And what that tells us in our Stewarding Legacies series is something so much bigger than just a little Bible verse on a cup, although that's a big deal. It tells us something about legacy, that small, thoughtful details point to an overarching, bigger picture than we could even possibly imagine. And that's what so many of us want to be a part of. We want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. So if you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself, are you willing to stand firm on the little details, even when it gets hard? And that's a huge takeaway, I think, that I think is needed to be said when we look at in and out. Are you willing to stand on the ground even when it's hard? Even when tons of people have tried to cancel in our culture somebody like Lynsi, who they've gone after her directly because of the Bible verses, wanting in and out to take it off. But she stood her ground because she knows that's what her uncle believed in whenever he put it on there. She knows that's what her dad believed in. She knows that's the family legacy, and she wants that to be carried on into the next generations. So she stands firm on it. I'm telling you, some things are just not for sale. Your convictions are not for sale if you're trying to do it right. And that's what really matters when we look at the in and out story.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head just talking through just the boldness to stand for the things and not compromising on certain values, obviously. And just being part of something that's bigger than themselves individually. But and I think too, that those kind of things when you look at that, they attract certain types of people. You know what I mean? When you're looking at um, companies that hire, obviously you want to get the right people in your culture, but man, not every company is right for everybody, and a lot of it has to do with just values and culture. And if there's one thing that I know of, one thing that we've learned about from the other companies like Hobby Lobby, Chick-fil-A, man, those are things that really, really matter. And I think that's going to attract certain types of people to those companies. And for people that are faith-based, it just kind of gives us encouragement that there are people that are being bold in their faith and they
Hmm.
are making a difference in their communities and in a culture where it is just completely backwards. It's very countercultural. And so have a lot of respect for everything that they've done. But one thing I think too we should note too is with with fast food chains, if you look at the majority of them, they are actually franchises. And I don't know if many people know this, but In-N-Out's not a franchise. It is completely company owned, like every location. And I forget how many locations now. I know it's well over 400, I believe. But every single one of them is owned by the company. And, I think that's just an interesting thing that we will see with certain businesses. Obviously, we talked about this before, like businesses that need to raise capital. They're going to go out and they're going to do an IPO. They've got to raise capital to keep growing and reinvesting in the business. But this is a company that keeps everything pretty tight. And if you Google, you read about that, and kind of what they would say is like, well, they want to keep things tight for very specific reasons, like quality control, right? Making sure that their distribution is correct and making sure that they're just keeping their high standards where it is. And so I think that is a worthwhile thing to know because they could definitely change things up and be able to expand significantly faster and have so many more locations if it was franchise owned because now you're shifting that essential capital risk to the
Hmm.
franchisee and you're just able to expand a lot faster. And so that's just a decision that they've made that they don't want to do that. And they want to make sure that this is still a company that is rooted in how it was founded and making sure that they stay just unified in what they believe and how they do things. And so just another thing that I think is worth kind of looking at and noticing that they just do things a little bit differently. Um, and yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've got cord on the history of everything. And I think we've kind of nailed the main things that we would for In and Out. But definitely encourage like everybody to read more about their story. Go look them up. I know she's been on several podcasts and stuff, and so yeah, we always encourage people to go do more research. This is just a quick
Mhm.
podcast to highlight about people that we believe that are stewarding their legacy well.
Yeah.
And for Lindsay and what she's doing with her team and stuff, I think she's doing very well with being bold in her faith.
Yeah. And we talk about this on the Leverage Life show a lot. You know, we want to leverage every opportunity that life throws at us, even the hard, even the grief, even the pain, the ups and the downs. Because you and I both know, Kyler, every single person that has ever lived on this entire world, you're going to go through hard things at some point. It just happens. You can either do it in isolation and you can let it destroy you, or you can do it with others. You can bring other people in and you can make it a legacy. And that's what Lindsay has done in preservation of the In and Out legacy by keeping those Bible verses on there. And the same thing can be true about your company and our company. Even when it's hard, are we going to stand firm? We're going to dig down deep. And are we going to lean into it and create a legacy out of it? We all know those stories of those who leaned into the hard, and it's ended up being a huge story and a testimony of what they've been through to ultimately build something amazing that has honored the Lord and been a huge help to tons of people around them, whether it be good fries or uniquely designed boxes that you can put at your car. But that's what the Snyder family is all about with In and Out, and a lot through their resilience in the hard and continued perseverance to keep showing up even when it was hard. And let that be the case for you today. Go through the grief, weed through the hard, and continue to persevere. And we'd love to hear whatever you're going through right now. If there's a way that we could help lean into the hard with you, even if it's just a phone call, why don't you give us a shout? 479-396-3528. 479-396-3528. We'd like to hear about the legacy you're trying to leave with your business and your family. And whatever hard you're going through, trust me, we've probably been through it too. And so many other people have as well. So shoot us a text and we'll see you next week for the fifth family, the one that I'm most excited about. We'll see you next week on the Leverage Life Show.